Hello, everyone. My name is Mirna, and on behalf of the Mindalia TV team, we want to welcome you to Mindalia live streaming, where thousands of people around the world gather to see the lectures and interviews organized by MindaliaTV.com. Today with us, Angel Rebo, CEO consultant, TV host, international public speaker, and president of the Wisdom for Kids Foundation, is going to be interviewing Douglas Vermeeren. His search for success strategies took him into the offices of the founders and CEOs of such companies as Nike, Reebok, Fruit of the Loom, among others. Now, Douglas is currently developing personal power mastery, rated as a number 3 in the world for the most powerful power personal development seminars. And now his new book, Personal Power Mastery, will take its place on the list of international bestsellers. Before starting with them, we want to remind you that Mindalia is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to help raise the level of consciousness around the world by sharing information like this one. You can help us. How? Subscribing to our channel if you haven't done it yet, leaving us a positive comment on this video, or sharing it with someone that you know that is going to benefit from the content that we're going to be developing here today. Also, we want to tell you that while we are live streaming, like right now, we have the active chat. It's the screen that you're going to be seeing here on my side. Through there, you can interact with us. You can ask your questions. We just please ask you to follow the format, word question in caps, the place where you're seeing us from, and the actual question at the end of the interview, it'll be answered. Last but not least, we want to remind you that Mindalia broadcasts on a daily basis, weekdays, in Portuguese through Mindalia Televisão, in English through Mindalia TV English, as you know already, and in Spanish through Mindalia Televisión. So we invite you to go to our different platforms, find out what we're developing there. We also invite you to collaborate with Mindalia through sharing your own personal knowledge. What you need to do is go to our website. On the top of the page, you will find a link. That link is going to take you to a form that you can fill out, and our technical team will be contacting you. I'm not going to entertain you any longer. I'm going to leave you with Angel and Douglas. Guys, welcome to Mindalia live streaming. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mirna. And thank you very much, Douglas, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. It's going to be fun. So the first thing that stood out when Mirna was introducing you is mastery. Mastery is such a big concept, right? And we as human beings, we try to master different things, but what's the most important thing that we should be mastering, Douglas?
Well, that's a really good question. And I guess the thing that maybe even to start with a bit of a context here is a lot of people think that mastery means perfection, and it doesn't, in fact. In fact, as I interviewed the world's top achievers, I found that they're not perfectionists. In fact, if let's put it this way, if you have a destination that you need to go to, like to drive to in a car, you would never ever wait for every light to be green before leaving, right? That's perfection. We don't need to wait for perfection. Instead, we're improvisers. So really perfection, in my opinion, is the definition of a forward progression, a forward movement, right? Now, to answer your question, what's the most important thing that we should master? That's an interesting question that we could really get into deep detail with. One of my hobbies that I love, aside from what I do for work, is I'm actually a mixed martial artist. So I do competitive mixed martial arts. And there's a saying that I love by the samurais that was said, centuries ago. And it said, if we can master the enemy within, no enemy without can harm us. And I think that that's the biggest thing that we can master in our life, is how do we really kind of master either those limiting beliefs that something can really tap into our greatest sense of confidence, courage, self-fulfillment. And when we can really stand on solid ground with ourselves, everything else becomes easier. Not easy, but easier, right? So that's what I would say.
And according to your experience, after helping so many people to master this, maybe enemy that we have inside, what would you say is the number one piece of advice that, according to your experience, you have seen that would help us to master this inner us?
Yeah, that's a really great question. In fact, the first thing that comes to my mind is probably, in essence, the most powerful. And maybe it's a two-part answer to your question. The first is the book that I've just written is called Personal Power and Mastery. And we've selected that title very carefully for a reason. That first word, personal, is so important, because until we get personally involved in creating the life that we really want, we can't have it. And the problem with many people who aren't achieving the results that they want in life is they often give their power away. In other words, they say, it's because of the economy that I don't have what I want, or the marketplace, or the family that I was raised in, or the situation where I'm living in, or the amount of income that I currently have. And so they give that power to someone else. Here's the bottom line, and we say this in our personal power mastery training, that if you own it, you can change it. And until you take personal responsibility, nothing will change. That's the first element of everything. You need to make a decision that you will own the results that are happening in your life and also own what needs to happen to create the new outcomes. Now, that's answer number one. Answer number two, I think, adds to that. And, you know, it's kind of interesting because as it was said in the introduction here, is I went out and I interviewed 400 of the world's top achievers, some of the biggest businesses in the world, companies and brands that everyone knows. But one of my favorite interviews was not with a company at all. In fact, one of my favorite interviews, I was looking to find out, how can we facilitate change in our life? The quickest way to make a change. So in other words, if you're not happy with what's going on, either in your relationships or your finances or your feelings of self-confidence or whatever it is, how can we make the quickest change to tap into our best self? Now, interestingly enough, as I was looking at where can I learn about change, the idea came that maybe I should talk to somebody at the suicide hotlines. Now, as you can imagine, with the suicide hotline person, the operator on the suicide hotline, they get some very intense telephone calls. And in fact, when someone calls their line, generally they're in a state of high despair. They're very discouraged. They're sometimes even some of them on the point of taking their lives. In fact, as I talked with one of my friends there, they said that they've even had many people call who are either standing with a gun in their hand, or they've just taken pills, and or they've maybe got a noose around their neck. Like these people are on the brink of a big, serious tragedy in their life. So how do you make a change for someone like that, right? Like, how do you shift them immediately? So as I was doing this interview with one of my friends that trains operators from the suicide hotline, she said something kind of startling to me. She says, out of all the things that we can say, there's only one thing that we're not allowed to say. And that's, don't kill yourself. And I thought, well, that's the first thing I would say, right? That's the very first place I would go. And I said, well, why can't you say that? And she said, well, because people, when they are in that state of feeling depressed and discouraged, the reason they're there is because they feel like they don't have any other choice. And so instead of taking away that choice by saying, don't kill yourself, we actually help them see that they have choices, and we help them see the consequences to those choices. So in other words, yes, you could kill yourself, but this is what that looks like. Or you could decide to stay, and this is what this looks like. And you could get the choice to get some help, and this is what this looks like. And the interesting thing is, and this is back to your question, how do we really regain that personal power and the mastery of it? We start by recognizing we have choices. And this is the fundamental power that we all have. The more choices we have, the more control and power we bring back into our life. Now, I'm not saying that we do all the choices that we think about, but knowing that we have those options gives us the freedom to expand what we can possibly do. And so in personal power mastery, in our training, we have people that come in that have either been through bankruptcies or foreclosures or divorce, or maybe diagnosed with terminal illness, or maybe there's been a family member that they've lost, or there's addiction challenges, or you name it, any kind of human negative experience you can imagine. We've had someone come through the training in the midst of that, like in the very moment that it's occurring. And so what we do to help them is to help them to gain their choices back. And I'm going to suggest with anyone who's listening today that even if you're not in that deep circumstance, but especially if you are, start writing down the choices that you can make today. Start writing those choices down. And naturally, like I said, you may not take advantage of all those choices, but simply knowing that they're there for you, that you can proceed in that way, it's going to give you your power back. And the more power you begin to receive back, the better the choices are that you're going to make. And I think that's the essence of what you were talking about.
And Mindalia, we help probably like around 11, 12 million people that watch our videos every single month. And I have to say, a lot of people are suffering. A lot of people need help, like desperately need help. So when you were describing what your friend was listening every single day, or training people to listen to every single day, I really felt I even had chills. So there's a lot of people that are going to be benefiting. So why is it so difficult to see those choices? Why? What's that blind spot? What's that thing that does not allow us from a human perspective to see that, Doug?
Well, I think that there's really three big things that kind of come to mind immediately. Fear and doubt are the first two. We often have fear that, you know, we need permission so much to make these choices, to explore, that we can think differently. And doubt is also another big thing. And both those things, fear and doubt, are really, how should we say, fragments of habit. You know, if our thinking is perpetually to go into a state of fear or a state of doubt, that's the first place we typically go. And that's just kind of the way that humans are wired, because we're always looking to sort of protect ourselves or protect our interest, and we fear about that. Now, one of the things I am going to share about fear, and we talk about this in the book, is that fear actually requires the future to exist. In other words, we are never fearful in the moment. If we look at actually and take that breath, what's going on right now, fear can't exist. And we see that all the time with people who are, you know, even in difficult situations, let's say combat, or, you know, they've got to rescue a drowning person or whatever. People generally, if it's in the present, they don't overanalyze it. They take action. I'm not saying they're not afraid. There's a difference between fear and being afraid. We'll talk about that another time. But they don't hesitate. They don't paralyze themselves through fear. So I think that that's one of the first things that we need to do, is we need to understand the importance of taking action. And we really need to understand when those opportunities appear, sometimes it's better to act and think afterwards. So act and don't think. If we really know what we want, that's important. Now, the other aspect of this, the third element that I think is really important, is how people make decisions. And most people don't understand that decisions don't affect where we are currently. Decisions affect the future. In fact, there's a Chinese saying that says, if you would know your past, look at your current situation. If you know your future, look at your current decisions. And most people make their decisions based on where they are, not where they want to go. What I mean by that is they say, when an opportunity comes to them, they say, oh, I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough resources or knowledge or opportunity or connections. Well, they're making their choice on the future based on what's happening now. And so they can't do that. If they want to have more time or more money or better opportunities, or you know, or better contacts or networks or what have you, they need to almost proceed in faith. They need to make a decision based on what they want, not on where they are. And so sometimes it means that you're going to have to put yourself out there, and that can be frightening. That can be, you know, again, back to this fear and doubt, that can cause us to question ourselves. So this is why I say, when, you know with clarity and in your heart, you feel that something is destined for you. And even if you can't see the answers, it's kind of like what Richard Branson says. When an opportunity presents itself to him, he makes a decision, and then he figures out how to do it later. And I also love this idea of entrepreneur. One of my favorite definitions of entrepreneur is a person who jumps off a building and builds an airplane on the way down. We get started, and then we figure it out. And in fact, most of the time when we get started, we find that we're far closer than we ever imagined. And it's just a matter now of taking that action. What is it that the Zen monks say? Leap, and the net will appear, right?
Wow, that's incredible. As you were talking about building the airplane while you were falling out of that massive building, you know, obviously it stands out that you talked to 400 of the, you know, super achievers in the world. Oh my God, what about fear? You know, maybe Doug is a Superman. You know, he has something that the rest of us don't. So. You know, this is a great obviously achievement, but you know, what role did fear play when you were doing that? Because
of course,
because we see you, oh my God, you know, Doug is so successful, but can we really overcome fear to a point in which we could actually reach out to the same people or similar people and have those conversations and learn from them?
Well, the interesting thing is one of the biggest things that beats fear is momentum. So once we are rolling, it's easier to keep going. But I'm reminded of a story component that we need to overcome fear. And this story will illustrate, so please bear with me. Imagine, if you will, just to give us the setting, that we're on top of Wutai Shan, Wutai Mountain, the birthplace of Buddhism. And at the top of that mountain, there's 3 Buddhist monks in training with the priest. And the priest says to them, the priest monk says, what is the definition of courage? And the first young monk says, well, it is when I see people that are in harm's way and the defenseless and those, I have courage and I defend them. Well, you know, the priest monk kind of says, that's an interesting concept. And he asks the second monk, well, what do you think? What is courage? Well, this monk, of course, trying to outdo the first monk says, well, courage is when we stand for duty, when we know and we have a duty that we must perform. And in harm's way and in challenges way, we stand and we do our duty. Well, the priest monk says, that's a fairly good definition. Thank you. And he pauses, and he then asks the third monk. Now, this third monk, of course, wants to really give the best answer. So he says, courage is standing up for our ideas, our beliefs, the things that we have as convictions, what we know to be true. And well, the priest monk kind of nods his head and says, thank you. Now, these three monks waiting, they're all confused. They're like, well, okay, what is courage? Finally, the priest monk says, courage is in fact love. That's what courage is. And he explains with the first young man, he says, if you're going to defend people that are downtrodden and they're defenseless, you wouldn't defend them unless you have a love for them. And the more you love someone, the more you will defend for them. Then he turns to the second young man and he says, and as for duty, unless we love our duty and we have a strong conviction of that duty, we will not defend it. Again, courage is love. Then he turns to the last young man and he said, the same for an ideal or a belief. It is based on love. We will not defend an idea that we are not passionate about or that we are not strong about. And by the way, we see this all the time today in society. You look on social media and people, when it's an idea that they really love, they really defend it, right? And so courage is love. So when we're talking about overcoming fear and getting ourselves going in the face of something that is daunting, something that is large and exciting, I'm going to suggest that your willingness to take action is actually going to be apparent in your in sort of that reflection of how much you really care. How much do you really care? And I know that in our audience we've got people that are, maybe entrepreneurs, young people that are building businesses, that are seeking after success in life. I'm going to tell you that the world will test you. It will test to see how much you love and are committed to the ideas that you have. In fact, it's really interesting. One of my success interviews that I did was with Edward James Olmos, the actor. And some of you know him from television's Battlestar Galactica. He was Commander Adama. He was in Miami Vice back in the day. He was on Blade Runner, the new one, and the original. I mean, he's done tons and tons and tons of movies. Just an amazing man. So as I was sitting with him for lunch, I said to him, what's your definition of success? And he said to me that some people think success is doing the things you don't like to do. But that's not success at all. He said success is finding something you love and then doing it, even when it's hard. Now, here's the deal, folks, is life is going to get hard. You are going to have moments that are going to test you, that are going to rock you, that are going to cause you to doubt. Some of those things will come even from within. Some of them will come from without, meaning other people, other situations. Life isn't going to be easy, but if you truly love it, the one common denominator that I saw among all the top achievers that I interviewed is they loved and believed in what they did enough to do it, even when it was hard.
And why do you think that life, we talk about life, and life, it's sometimes like an abstract concept, right? It's things that happen to us or are around us. And again, going back maybe to fear and to challenges, but why is life throwing those things to us? And maybe it's to us and not to other people.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I guess, and this is a good question, I suppose. I'm not saying I've got the right answer, but let's go philosophical for a moment. I believe that, if you look at what you want is on a much higher level than where you are. And in fact, I was with Bob Proctor recently, and he and I were just kind of chatting about this for the new movie that I'm creating. Everything has a vibration, as we know. And the reason why the things that we really want are at a higher vibration and where we're at a different vibration is really the thing that keeps us from getting what we want. We need to get to that level. And I believe that to get to that level, the universe, if you will, needs to make of us a better person. So in other words, before we can have it, we have to do it. But before we do it, we have to be it, right? There's certain things that we have to become in order to really get to these high levels of success. And it's almost like if you think a diamond, a diamond we know originates as a piece of coal, and it requires hard pressure and time oftentimes, and this constricting sort of feel around the coal to make it this pristine diamond. And then it is carved, and then it is, chipped away by someone who has the skills to make it that valuable piece of a gemstone of what we now have. So I'm going to suggest that that's kind of the way that the universe works as well, as if, we all want more than we currently have. Socrates said that we're teleological beings and that we're only happy as we pursue progress. But the problem with that, and maybe the benefit as well, because it's got the dichotomy of both good and bad, it's going to create effort. You're going to have to really push to get to that level. But at the same token, you're becoming much better. What is it that Einstein said? That a problem can never be solved on the same manner of thinking that created the problem. So in other words, if we want to have greater than what we have to become greater than we currently are. If you want to have more, you've got to become more. To expand what you have, you've got to expand who you're going to be. And I believe that that whole expansion is actually more important than even that end destination. Because as you become expanded in that way, even greater opportunities open up that your perspective at this lower level was never able to see. And so I think that that's why the universe, how should we say, kind of grows us. It's designed to grow us. In fact, if you look at the universe since the Big Bang, right? The Big Bang, everything is now expanding. And you have to be growing with it. If you're not growing with it, if you're not becoming more, you're technically fighting against the entire universe, right? So that's the fastest way to growth, is just go with the flow, so to speak, of expansion. You need to.
The ultimate mission of Mindalia is actually to help the world to increase their consciousness, increase the consciousness level of the planet. So of those 400 top achievers that you interviewed, did you see some commonalities, some common denominator about the concept that they had in their lives and in their minds of what the universe is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's really the essence of the whole book, Personal Power Masteries. We get into how they view the universe in a variety of facets. But if I could maybe just share what I think is the one underlying key on that, and this is something your listeners may want to write down, because this is the one that will change your life, is that the universe is an echo chamber. What I mean by that is what you put out is what comes back. So if you approach the things in your life with hesitation, with grudgingness, with holding back, with fear, with stepping back, that's how everything in your life is going to appear. Everything will appear with hesitation if that's how you approach it. Yet on the other hand, if you approach it with faith, confidence, if you show up with boldness, if you're a massive action taker and you're very firm in what you want and what you believe, well, that's how it's going to show up in your life directly from the universe. So the universe is indeed an echo chamber. That's certain.
Let's go back a little bit onto your life, because I would like everybody to know a little bit more about the story of Doug. How did you personally end up? Let's go a little bit even behind or behind the scenes.
Sure.
How did you end up doing what you do today? How did you end up interviewing those top achievers? What is that generated that passion? Exactly.
Sure. Well, I'll be honest with you. I didn't grow up with any kind of personal development exposure in my life. Like, I didn't know about any of these books or seminars or speaking or any of these things. I just didn't know about that. My father actually worked in construction, and my mother babysat kids in the home. We were not wealthy. In fact, we were lower middle class, if anything. In fact, I remember even as a kid that most of the clothes that I wore to school were hand-me-downs from my uncle. And the groceries in our family were rationed. In other words, we couldn't just go and open the fridge and help ourselves. We had to ask permission, and there just wasn't enough food to just haphazardly do that. So we were broke. And so here's the deal is, I believe that everybody has in their mind this idea of it's important to work smarter and not harder. You've heard that, right? Work smarter, not harder. And I believe everybody has an idea on what that looks like. Well, my parents' idea of working harder, not smarter, was simply to work harder, right? So put in more hours, put in more time. And so that's kind of, my father taught me the importance of hard work. And so when I was in college and I needed to come up with more money, I decided what I needed to do was get more work, another job, right? And so I was living in California at the time, and I took a job selling pest control door to door. And if you've never done door-to-door sales, it's one of the most challenging jobs that you can imagine. And we would start early in the morning, and I would start typically, about 9 o'clock in the morning, but we'd have sales meetings before that. So I was already working by 7, and then I would work typically till 9 or 10 at night on the doors, and then we would come home and I'd have to process all the paper. So I'd get to bed about 11 and then start the next day again. And the problem with that is I wasn't having a lot of luck with the sales. So, I was discouraged and I was frustrated. And by the way, I was going to school at the time, so I had student loans, maxed out credit cards. I had all kinds of obligations that I wasn't able to meet. So I was broke, and my parents couldn't give me any money. So I had to figure it out. So here I was knocking on doors, not making sales, carrying all this debt and everything else. I was super discouraged. And I don't mind telling the audience this, but even to the point of depression, I thought of quitting 1,000,001 times, and I thought of all the negative, things that had come into my life up until that point. So I thought it was, it's time to just shut this down. And so one day I was going to quit my job. I was ready to give up, and I had no other job to go to. And as I was sitting on a bench, very discouraged, ready to, find another thing to do, I had a friend of ours come to me, and he said, "I want you to go to work today." And I said, "Well, why? There's no point." And he said, "I want you to go to work today, and when you're done, you come and see me at my home, and I've got a gift for you." And I thought, because this guy was a little bit more wealthy, maybe he's going to pay all my bills. Maybe he's going to give me a job in one of his companies. So I decided, okay, I'll give it one more day. I'll go to work. Well, as I came home that night, no, he didn't give me a check. No, he didn't give me a new job. He didn't rescue me in that sense. What he gave me was actually 2 books. The first book was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And as he gave it to me, he said, "This one will be important. The first person you need to become friends with is yourself." And I didn't even understand what that meant, but he said, "Trust me, read the book, you'll figure it out." Okay, I committed to read the book. Then he pulled out another book and he said, "This one's called Think and Grow Rich." Now, right away, he had my attention with the idea of grow rich, right? Like, of course, I was ready to do that. So he says, "You read that one first, then you read this one and report back to me. And in the meantime, you keep going to work every day." Now, as I read those books, my thinking began to change. Obviously, first, I began to believe in myself. I began to recognize that I was more than I thought I was previous to that. I also recognized something which might be useful for your audience to understand, is that a lot of the gurus today say to become successful, you need to step out of your comfort zone. I'm going to say that that's not true. In fact, what you need to do is you need to start by stepping into your brilliance zone. Who are you? What are you really good at? What is what gets you excited and passionate and powerful? And once you've understood who you brilliantly are, try and get comfortable in that zone. Like, for example, I don't do my own dental work. I don't build my own websites. I don't do my own taxes. I'm not brilliant at any of that. But I have found what I am brilliant at, and I get uncomfortable in that area of my life. So I become the very, very best in my brilliance that I can. So as I began to do that, naturally what happened, the sales that I was doing on the door-to-door sales began to increase. In fact, so much so that I finished in the top 4 of that company that year. In fact, I think I was number 3 or so, and my name even went into a draw to win a car. I didn't win the car, but my name went into the draw to win a car as one of the top salespeople. But from being discouraged, giving up, almost suicidal, depressive, and everything else, to becoming like the number 3 person in that sales company, that was amazing. So as I read that book, Think and Grow Rich, there was another thing that happened to me. As I read, and for those of you not familiar with the book, you should read it. To write that book, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill went out and he interviewed some of the world's top achievers in his day. People like Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, the Rockefellers, the Wright brothers, who built the first airplane, the Wrigleys, like so many top achievers of his day. And that's where he learned the principles of success. So as I read that book, I thought, wow, what would it be like to talk to the top achievers in our day, like today, right now? And I decided to go out and start interviewing those top achievers. And a couple of amazing things happened. Like one, in Napoleon Hill's time, he interviewed basically the business leaders of the day. Well, I decided to start interviewing celebrities, athletes, people who had created, multi-million-dollar companies on the internet. And the internet, of course, didn't exist in Napoleon Hill's day. There was a lot changed, right? And so I started getting things in my life from those interviews that validated what Napoleon Hill had said, but also expanded on it, because some of the things that I studied were different. In fact, one of my interviews was with a neuroscientist who did like brain surgery and stuff. And it was interesting. She pointed out to me that 98% of what we've learned about the mind and the brain has changed over the last decade. In fact, just what we understand psychology-wise and neuroscience-wise has changed dramatically. So there were a lot of things that I was able to understand about success that, in Napoleon Hill's day, people didn't even think to ask, right? And so that's kind of how my journey started. And then really to kind of take it to today, kind of what happened is as I started doing the interviews, remember, I was broke. I was totally broke. In fact, I remember going into a supermarket one day and I put down a loaf of bread, a jug of milk, and a couple of like instant noodles. And it came to $4.22. I'll never forget this, $4.22. I ran through my bank card and it declined. So I didn't even have enough to buy $4.22 of milk, right? And instant noodles and stuff. And so what happened is, as I started interviewing the world's top achievers, inside of 6 months, I'm talking 180 days, 180 days, I was able to do $1.6 million in business, which is approximately $9,000 a day. So here's one of the big takeaways. Get a mentor, somebody who can take you to high levels, and your life will begin to change. Now, as you can imagine, what happened as soon as I started interviewing people like, one of the 4 founders of FedEx, the former VPs of marketing for KFC and American Airlines, and the CEOs of Fruit of the Loom, and all these companies, all of a sudden people started to invite me to come in and speak and share what I had learned. And now the crazy thing is, I'd never done that before. I'd never been a speaker. It wasn't even on my radar. I didn't know there was such a job title. I didn't know it was a career. So I started speaking about that, and I fell in love with the speaking and training industry. Now, keeping in mind, not a lot of people know this about me, but I still do a lot of business and real estate investment and other entrepreneurial adventures. I guess that's it. I was going to say ventures, but it really is an adventure, in addition to my speaking. So I do speak, but really the bulk of my my time and my interest and my money, and also I would say my passion, is still in creating, in building business. It's not enough to have an idea. You need to have a creation. An idea just stays here. A creation is when you bring it to the world. And so I get really fired up about that. A lot of my income and my money is from those ventures. And interestingly enough, a lot of people ask me, okay, so, with these top 400 achievers, like, are you still like connecting, and are you still? Yeah, I still have many of these guys are still my friends and mentors. We bring them into our Entrepreneur Academy, where we teach people how to get to success using the skills from these mentors. And I actually even still every Friday meet with a mentor. In fact, one of my mentors, we do a lunch every single Friday, unless either of us are out of town, but he's worth about $700 million, and we go for lunch. And I actually do, funny enough, on our social media, a quick visit, so you get some of the insights that we talk about every week. And some of the things that he shared are just incredible. Maybe later on through the interview, we'll talk about some of those, but you've really got to be open to learn. And if you really want to become successful, this is maybe the point, right? Like early in my career, before I had made any money, before I made any success, I remember that I had talked to one of my billionaire friends that I was interviewing about growing business. And as I showed him my idea for this business, he said, well, that part won't work. And I started to argue with him. As I say, well, this is why it will work. This is the idea why it will work. And he just kind of rolled his eyes. And then I shared another idea, and he goes, well, that part there won't work. And then again, I argued with him, and he rolled his eyes. Finally, he got frustrated, and he says, listen to me. He says, do you want to be rich, or do you want to be right? And most people want to be right. And that's why they stay broke. They want to hang on to their ideas. And this same mentor explained, if you choose to be right, you get to keep what you already have. If you want to be rich, you've got to shut up, and you've got to listen. And you've got to recognize that those who are doing better than you and who have more than you, not only in terms of money, but in terms of experience and knowledge and connections and network, those that have been there before have the quickest way to accelerate your success and get you there quicker. And so I would say, what really made the difference for me from going from who I was as a broke kid in hand-me-downs to a multi-millionaire with all kinds of international speaking opportunities and business opportunities, it's really that I learned to listen very carefully to those that were already successful, and then duplicate what they taught me to do, right?
You've mentioned training, and training is extremely important
100%.
because you're able to leave a legacy. You're able to spread what you learn. When you are in front of an audience and you're teaching them, what's that passion? What's that thing that keeps you so much alive and connected with them? What are you trying to accomplish, Doug?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about passion, because most people say that if you want to be successful in life, you've got to find your passion and your purpose. And I think that that's partially true. I think if you want to be successful in life, you've got to expand your passion and purpose so it doesn't just include you. You see, most people say, it's funny because when I ask them, what do you do for a living? I help businesses. I'm very I-focused, right? It's me, it's I. And the truth of the matter is purpose and passion really have to have two components, and they need to overlap. Let me maybe explain it this way. Warren Buffett said, what you love about you is your hobby. What others love about you is your business, right? And so you've got to understand that any kind of amount of success, whether it's financial or even opportunities that you'll have or freedom or whatever, always involve a transaction. What do I mean by that? Someone else, if you're going to get money, for example, someone else needs to pay you, right? It's you can't print the money in your basement by yourself. Someone else needs to be involved. Same thing with opportunity. If you want a bigger opportunity than you currently have, it's going to come from someone else, right? Or you want more freedom in your life, it's going to come in your life because someone else has helped you open that door. So everything requires a transaction with someone else. There must be a transaction there with someone else. So when it comes to passion and purpose, if you really want to be successful with your passion and purpose, you need to find what you love and the reason why you love it. And you need to overlap this with what someone else loves, why they love it, and also why it's important to them. And the more that overlaps, where you can provide a valuable service or opportunity or product, and you love it, and it's part of your purpose, and you get someone else that they love it, and it's part of their purpose, the more people you can find that synergize with that, the greater your success will be. So I believe that passion and purpose, it's never a selfish thing. It's never built in a closet. In fact, here's something interesting too that one of my mentors shared that I think is really important to notice. Now, this is from a multi-billionaire, okay? So when we read self-help books, let's be honest, some of those guys, they come with the best of intentions, but they're not really sharing experience, they're sharing theory. And you've heard it written in every single wealth book that's out there that says, pay yourself first, right? We've all heard that before. Well, I'm here to tell you that the definition of pay yourself first has been misunderstood. And that's why it's not working for people. Let's do it this way. Let's say that we're all on the boat, the Titanic. Most of us have seen the movie, right? All of a sudden, the iceberg, wham, we hit the iceberg and it's time to get off the boat, right? So they put these lifeboats down. If we followed that pay yourself first, what does that mean? That means you get onto the boat, right? I'm paying myself first. I'm on the boat. But if you think about it, now what happens when you're in the middle of the ocean by yourself on the boat? Let's say it runs up onto a deserted island. How long are you going to survive by yourself, right? Right? So being by yourself like that doesn't really serve a whole lot of purpose. So let me share with you what I recommend you do with your lifeboat. The first people that you want to put onto the lifeboat are probably those that you love the most. In other words, your family members. For the listeners, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's children, maybe it's, again, your parents, those that you love. So that's who goes onto the boat first. And when I pay myself first, back to this idea of paying yourself first, I take care of them. I make sure that those things that are most valuable to me are intact. Now, the next thing that I'm going to put onto my lifeboat, to be quite frank, before I sail off to sea, is someone that's going to help me stay alive. Now, in the sense of going to a deserted island, I want somebody that can hunt, fish, build shelter, and maybe put out a distress signal. In business, we call that the golden goose. Okay, your business that's providing those golden eggs, and that can include not only the service that you're doing, so you're going to, paying yourself first maybe means investing in your business to make sure that it's going to keep producing. Maybe it's even marketing that's going to keep producing, and certainly it's going to be your customers, especially your best customers. So you're going to take care of them so they have a premium experience, so they'll always come back and keep paying you. Now, when all those things are on the boat, I believe that's paying myself first. Because by paying myself in that way, I'm going to be able to pay myself again and again and again and again. There'll never be an end. And then you know what? Then I'll get on the boat. Then I'm on the boat. And because I put all those other things first, when the boat pushes off, I've got everything that I need to be content, happy, and survive. And so I think that this idea of pay yourself first, most people have misunderstood. You can't run a business, especially in today's economy, by being selfish and greedy and hoarding what you have. You need to really build that pay yourself first needs to include a community. And that's why this idea, like I said in the beginning, of your passion, your purpose, overlapping with someone else's passion and purpose is really the key to success.
I think that we will never have enough time to go over everything.
Yeah, we're just getting started.
You can share, absolutely. I mean, suddenly I watched the timer and we are well over the typical place where I stop the guest and we have some questions. But
yeah, for sure.
There's so many things I would like to ask you. But one that definitely stands out of everything else is, what would be that one thing that those 400 top achievers have told you not to do consistently? Is there something? Is there something that you could say, guys, do not do that?
Yeah,
you've actually mentioned a few during the interview.
Yeah,
You've said, those concepts are not properly understood, all those things. But would there be something that maybe, guys?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I do see consistently that a lot of people do that doesn't really work, and I guess, how do we say this? The first thing is you need to get very specific and clear of what you want to do. A goal that is specific and clear becomes attainable and near. And the problem with most people is they don't have enough focus in their life. In other words, especially entrepreneurs, it's like they have ADD HD, which is ADD in high definition. All entrepreneurs have it. And it's kind of a tragedy because it's almost like, if you think about it this way, in our life, we've got a room full of plants, right? Like potted plants. And you've only got one glass of water. The problem with most people is they try to water every plant that is in their life. And as a result, things die and nothing ever develops. What you need to do is you need to select one or two plants that are really important to you. You need to give it the proper investment of focused energy and focused time and focused commitment that it can grow. Once it begins to grow and take root, then you can add other things to it, but make sure that you get something that has enough substance that it can start to pay you back, that it can start to give back to you. And I'm going to suggest that most people also run their day the same way, where it's a very split focus. And if you look at the top achievers that are in the world, I kind of think it's like we've seen Neapolitan ice cream before, where it's got, you know, strawberry, chocolate, vanilla. Well, what happens that when it all melts, it turns into a gross kind of muddy thing. Well, top achievers don't run their life like Neapolitan ice cream, where they're doing this today and then that another day and then this another day. Everything has a very specific focused purpose. And so, you know, they know what they're going to do during the day. And by the way, when you have that specific purpose, it also gets rid of things like procrastination. Procrastination is when a person hasn't truly decided what they're trying to accomplish or where they're looking to be, and they're not on fire about that purpose and passion. They don't know where it is. So therefore, procrastination is pretty easy because all activities are kind of based equal, and they know that, you know, everything is sort of mismatched and there's no real focus. So I'm going to suggest the biggest mistake that most people make is poor focus and clarity. They need to really understand what they want. And then maybe a second thing that does come to my mind that I think is important that a lot of people really miss out on is they don't understand the value of time. In fact, one of my interviews that I did with one of the top achievers, I said to him before I got the interview, I said, I need 15 minutes to ask you a few questions. And he said, sure, that would be fine. So they booked 15 minutes. When I sat down with him, he pulled out his iPhone. Well, it wasn't an iPhone at the time, it was a timer actually. He put on a timer for 15 minutes and said, go, you've got 15 minutes. Well, you know what? Everybody else I talked to, I said 15 minutes and they gave me like an hour. So I was like, oh, right? And after I realized that if you've got 15 minutes and you know how to use 15 minutes, you can often do a lot more in 15 minutes than you can do in an hour. And it was interesting that as I spoke with him later, because after I honored the 15 minutes, he gave me more time later, right? So that's another important lesson too. Do what you say you're going to do, and you'll always have the door open. So anyways, we talked about this idea of 15 minutes later, why people have these meetings for an hour at, say, a Starbucks or whatever. And he says it's because we've been programmed that way through the educational system. Educational system up until now, when you went to school, they told you if you're going to go learn math or science or English, it's a 1-hour course, right? Every day you go for an hour, you sit with the teacher, then the bell rings, then you go to the next class, you sit there for an hour. So we've been trained to think that every meeting that we engage in needs an hour. And the truth of the matter is it doesn't. And I have found that when I have worked with, you know, other entrepreneurs and I've trained them on this idea that you can get a lot done in a 15-minute meeting, that they become a lot more precise in preparing for the meetings and planning the meetings and asking better questions so that they can move on. And also I'll mention, if you want access to top achievers yourself, like these top people, you need to be prepared. They're not going to sit there and talk about the weather or the latest sports event or whatever. They want to get to the heart of the matter and then move on and get to work. Right. So those are, I think, the two most important.
Absolutely. Thank you. How can we find you online for everybody that is watching Mindalia TV today? What's the easiest way to reach out to you, Doug?
Yeah, probably our website is personalpowermastery.co, personalpowermastery.co. But here's the other thing is I've got tons and tons of free resources online. And so if you head over to Facebook, for example, we've got a community there called Personal Power Mastery. It's free to join. We post things every day. Really great opportunity for you to recognize, you know, what you can be doing better personally. But if you're an entrepreneur and you own your business, on Facebook, we've also got a free group there called the Entrepreneur Academy. And every day I post tools there, and I also bring in a lot of the top achievers that we've been talking about today, and they provide business advice as well. But those two resources are free.
Excellent. So let me go to the questions before we run out of time. So the first question
Absolutely.
is, thank you. Thank you. So the first question is, what is the main skill we should be teaching our kids so they can succeed in the new world being developed right now?
Well, I think the biggest thing that most kids are not being taught is the essence of a belief in themselves and the fact that they don't have to follow the pattern that you know, we see through the school systems. And I'm not trying to criticize school systems, but recently I was reading a very in-depth scholarly article that talked about how our school system was developed to prepare people for a factory mindset. In other words, you're going to come in and you're going to do your job and you're not going to expand beyond that. Well, right now, the economy that we live in is known as the entrepreneurial revolution, where we've got so many technologies that are converging on each other that opportunities are endless. And we've got people that, like, for example, the world record for making $1 million from zero right now is 6 minutes and 33 seconds. And we've got a younger age for people that are becoming millionaires and billionaires than ever before. So to survive in today's economy, I don't believe it's important to prepare people for a job, because even those, if we look at the statistics right now, people our age, Angel, we're going through 2 or 3 or 4 careers. And so a job is kind of an obsolete concept. And sure, you may work for someone else in the future, but the real concept that you need to prepare yourself for is adaptability. You need to understand that the mindset today that is making stability, that is creating security, is in fact the opposite of preparing for a job. It's preparing to be useful in society. And so I would suggest, if you're working with your kids, number one, give them that belief and confidence in themselves that when they have great ideas and they have things they want to pursue, that they are on the right path. That's important. And then I would say nurture every interest and passion and skill that they have so that they can be specialized in something that they enjoy and that they can excel at. And don't ever say no, because here's the deal, is the things that our generation thought were viable career options that we would say, oh, go be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. I mean, those options are so limiting compared to what's there. The things that our kids and our future are going to actually make their income from and their resources, we probably don't even know it exists yet. We don't even know what it is yet. So for us to limit the possibility by saying, no, there's no future there, we're very ignorant. There is a future in so many places that we don't even see coming thus far. Like the future is there's no boundaries, right? There's no boundaries.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question then. There is so much developed already. Is the world still in need of new ideas?
100%. In fact, you know what's so funny? I love that you said that. Did you know that way back, of course, when we had the Wright brothers that were coming out building airplanes, or Alexander Graham Bell working on the telephone, and everybody, in fact, there was a thing that I read one time that even in the patent office, they said, you know, we're going to pretty soon have to close up the patent offices because there's really no new ideas that people can come up with. We've come up with everything that there is. And I'm here to tell you that even when we think we have hit a limit, we always come up with something new. You know, like whoever thought, first of all, that cell phone technology would be here? Right? And then after cell phones, whoever thought you would be able to access the entire internet on your phone, right? Whoever thought of such things as tapping a payment on a card to make things go? Whoever thought, like, I mean, the list goes on and on and on of amazing things. In fact, one of my friends in success interviews was Ron Klein. And Ron Klein, most of you don't know who he is, but I guarantee you've used what he's invented. He's the inventor of the little magnetic strip on the back of every single credit card and ATM card. And as an inventor, you know, in his day, everybody thought that they had everything figured out. But he came up with an idea that nobody'd even considered. And now it's on everybody's, like everybody in their wallet has a card that has one of those strips on it. So I'm going to suggest that there's really no limit. The only limit that there ever will be are the limits that we place upon ourselves, and if we will hesitate to imagine. You know, if you can really conceive of a new idea, if you can, you know, I always look at it this way, that, you know, the more that we kind of open our horizons, the more the universe will share to us things that are possible. In fact, it was interesting. I was reading a report from Harvard University once, and they said that the average person has a minimum of $6 million enterprise ideas a year. I'm going to tell you, I know people that have that in a morning, right? And for those of you listening, I guarantee that if you're open to it, there will be ideas come into your head that this world needs and that we've never seen before.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question. Are men and women heard in the same way? Or are we still in a patriarchal society where women's opinions or ideas are underheard?
I think it's shifting, but to be honest, I still think that women are not valued as much as they ought to be. I can't remember where I was reading this the other day, but there was someone who was saying, what a shame in our society that even through, you know, the time of pre-World War II, we were only utilizing half of the mentality that our nation had because we were only really listening to men. And my grandmother during the Second World War, actually it would have been my great-grandmother, she, while the men were off to war, started being employed, and she shared how so many of the innovations that we have in business came from women who were in the factories that for the very first time their opinions were becoming validated, and they came up with new ideas on how to do things. And I think that's just astounding, and I don't think we've tapped into that yet. In fact, a while ago, and again, I'm not criticizing men. You know, we've been around a long time, and I think we have definitely our value that complements what women do, but I do think we need to give women a chance to step up even higher. There was an article that I was reading, and I can't remember if it was USA Today or somewhere else, that talked about women in business, and there's now more women entrepreneurs appearing on the scene than any other time in history. And one of the reasons why women are being so successful is because they're much more nurturing towards relationships, whereas in men, oftentimes took longer to make business decisions at times. They required more, how should we say, kind of trust and things between men, and there were more contracts that needed to be drafted, and women are just more intuitionally more connected to each other, and so the speed of business with women seems to be moving quicker. Now again, I don't know all the statistics and details on that, but what I can tell you is that even in our company, I prefer to hire an equal amount of men and women, because I believe that men come with a very specific set of skills which are valuable, but women do as well. And when we can find the complement of that, we have a more holistic and synergistic business. And so I'm a firm believer that I think in the future we're going to see a lot more powerful female entrepreneurs than we've ever seen. And I welcome them, because I think it's going to make the marketplace a much better and sustainable place.
Excellent. The next question, and the last question actually, is, do you follow any morning routine that you may want to share with us?
I do, actually, I do. As I mentioned earlier, I'm also a mixed martial artist, so this just isn't about success. But what I do is I actually start my day every single morning by reading and studying. So I get my mind going before my body. In fact, for those of you that are interested to know what I read, I actually read between 10 and 20 books per month. And I'm not talking little books. I'm talking generally, you know, fairly thick books, right? So I'm reading between, 10 and 20 books. I publish what I read online. So if you want to follow me and see what I'm doing, just join me on Facebook and or Instagram, and I post a picture of all the books that I read every 30 days. Now, I read a lot because I'm on airplanes and I don't watch a lot of TV and that kind of stuff. So I'm always reading. I believe that if you know it, you can flow it, right? So you can have the content at your disposal at any time. So I'm reading books on business, life, etc. So here's the deal. After I read, what I then do is I go and I work out. So physical body workout. And I've got a very particular specific workout that I do that suits my martial arts. I specifically train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so in the morning, I do some weight training, some cardio, and some movement training. And while I'm doing that, I typically will watch YouTube videos that are instructional videos, and I will take notes. In fact, I carry this black notebook with me everywhere I go. I'll take notes on the things that I learn, and then that becomes part of what I'm doing during the day as well, or things that I want to consider. Now, funny enough, after I'm done that, then I go to work and do a variety of things, including delegating to a lot of my staff what needs to be done. And by around 11, I actually go and I fight. So I'm doing training. Typically 3 to 4 days a week, I try to train. When I'm done that at about 1 o'clock, I go back to work, and that's where I'm implementing some of the other ideas that I have. By the way, one of the things that I think is really important to even talk about is, as an entrepreneur, just like your audience I talked about, I have a lot of good ideas like ADD, business ADD, right? And so what I'll do is I will write the notes down here of things that I want to accomplish. And then every Friday when I meet with my mentor, I'll talk about some of the ideas that I thought about that week. And he will help me understand which ones maybe I should pursue, which ones I should hang on to for a future date, and which ones I should ignore that are just distractions. And so I really have that as part of my day now, to organize what I'll do throughout the day. Now, I should mention probably the most important thing of my day is I do have a schedule of things that I need to do, but every night before I go to bed, I actually prioritize those. And I might add to them, and I might take things off. And so that way, when I go to sleep, I already know what I'm going to do when I wake up. And I find that helps me to wake up earlier and to be on target for the whole day. And about this idea of procrastination, I also schedule it, okay? So I do believe in procrastination, but I schedule it. So every Friday afternoon, I schedule, and I have to procrastinate. Now, the interesting thing is because it's scheduled, when something during the week comes that I need to do, I get it done. When I get to that window of procrastination on Friday, generally I don't have anything I really need to procrastinate, so I never do it. But it's scheduled, so I know that that's where it belongs. If I choose to procrastinate, I'll do it then. I procrastinate procrastination.
I never heard that before. That's brilliant.
It works really good. It works really good.
Well, thank you. I mean, this hour has been really short. So, in the name of Mindalia TV and Mindalian Television, thank you very much for being with us today and for sharing so much with our audience that so much needs it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. And again, this is Angel Rebo with Mindalia TV. Thank you very much for everybody watching us today, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.